Hi everybody, it's meteorologist Joe Cioffi. It's Thursday. I wish it were Christmas already, and I wish I had some time off. You in the weather world, you actually sometimes wind up working as hard or harder with the small events as you do with the big events. And to top it off, we seem to now possibly be looking at, at the moment, hopefully it stays that way, a minor snowfall for parts of the areas around from New York City east and south. It'll be the third snowfall, potentially of an inch or more, in the last 6 days. Now, 3 snowfalls in the month of December that produce more than an inch is not an unusual occurrence, but it doesn't happen too often. But to have 3 of them in the first half of the month, and particularly having 3 of them in 1 week, even at any time of the winter, that's a little odd. So I'm going to be digging around to see if that's a bit of a record. Given the circumstances of what's happening with weather models right now, with what's going on in the for my area, I think I probably will do. I'll give you a schedule here. We're going to do a Joe Cioffi show at roughly at about 9:15 Eastern time tonight on Facebook. So at that point, the new NAM will be in, and we'll be able to get maybe a good idea of what's going to happen tomorrow. And I will do another one tonight right here on YouTube. I will live stream probably, with a little luck, 11:30. I missed it last night, but if not, sometime say between 11:30 and midnight. So I'm just going to give you guys a heads up. Let me show you what's going on. First of all, the snowfall for last night and this morning played according to form, thankfully, and we wound up with a general 1 to 3 inch snowfall from parts of southeastern Pennsylvania to southern New Jersey, to New York City, the Hudson Valley, Long Island, and Connecticut. So that played out. There was it was more on the order of 2 to 3 inches on Suffolk County on Long Island, but we didn't have any kind of crazy upside surprise, so that was nice. Kept things rather calm. So as we look at the satellite loop tonight, there is still a lot going on. You can see the clouds that are dropping down in the northern plains and western Great Lakes. That is yet another upper air trough that's dropping southeastward and swinging around. And you can also see a little bit of a subtropical jet shooting some moisture across Texas and into Louisiana and parts of Alabama and Georgia. Not anything exceptional, certainly not as strong as that subtropical ridge, subtropical jet was last Friday, but it is something. And the thing is that we were looking, the models have been kind of focusing on a storm trying to form on Friday off the Virginia, North Carolina coast. And actually back about a week ago in the long range, a few of the models did something substantial with it. Then it kind of disappeared, or was just indicated to be very weak and out to sea. Well, yesterday, as we were paying attention to the first thing, I happened to notice that a couple of models started moving it back closer to the coast and doing something with it. And indeed, that trend continues today. Now, I would not feel comfortable with going for anything more than just a light event and maybe a repeat performance of what we just had. But I don't want to completely rule out that we could have a westward shift enough that somebody gets involved in some moisture, especially along the immediate coast, and parts of New Jersey and Long Island, coastal New Jersey and Long Island, wind up with 2, 3, or 4 inches. I think that's a long shot right now, but you know what? We weren't supposed to get anything to begin with. Now some models are spitting out 1/10 to 1/4 of an inch of liquid for those coastal areas, much less as you go north and west. So I don't want to say no. So let's start with, we're going to go really tight. We're going to start with the NAM model from this afternoon. And let me get it a little smaller so we can see the areas to the south. So what's good about this is that it's inside the 24-hour time frame, which makes it, when the model starts coming out, we'll have them almost immediately, and we won't have to wait for the whole run. But you can start to see tomorrow morning there's some snow that actually breaks out, light snows. Maybe a lot of this is aloft, hard to say, but in parts of Western Virginia there, we are now coming up to 1 o'clock, and you can see that there's kind of a broken area of snow. This is supposed to represent the radar, and here we are at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock. There's your low center to the south and east. Now, this literally would suggest that the snow would just skim the coastline, maybe extend inland in parts of South Jersey, but it wouldn't barely make it to New York City as the northern edge, and into Long Island, but not into southern Connecticut. And there's about it's about 15 miles across in some places here, so we're talking 15 miles. But I just want to show you where we were 2 runs ago with this. And there it is. For the same time frame, you could barely find it. Now we'll come a little bit closer to real time. This was this morning's model run where it just got it to where it's touching the coast. And now we've got this mess where it's shifted a little bit more. And, some models have actually gone even further west. I was hoping the RGEM would be in. It was not in earlier, and it doesn't look like it. This may be it. We may finally have the new RGEM, and I believe we do. But this is the RGEM model for snow as it sees it for tomorrow evening, and it's covering most of New Jersey except for the northwest. Long Island gets it into parts of Connecticut as well, and then moves it to the east. So the RGEM, which has been continuing to be a very good short-range tool, is even more bullish here with this snow. It has a more tucked-in low near the coast, and that's probably why. And it moves it, we get into a decent shot of precip. As far as the liquid precip is concerned, and there you have it. This is the RGEM's view. So the darkest green is 4/10. So this is 3/10. Here's 2/10. So basically 1/10 to 2/10 of an inch over Long Island, and 2 to 3/10 of liquid for central and southern New Jersey, and under 1/10 of an inch as you go up north of, say, Route 195 in New Jersey and in the Hudson Valley, mostly light amounts, and maybe back to about New York City. So this certainly would suggest that some areas could see a coating to a couple of inches. I know that's it's a small event. That's probably the extent of it as far as I see it in terms of precip at this point. But again, I don't want to not rule out the possibility that this thing could wind up shifting a little bit further to the west. And then as we go through Saturday at least looks like a pretty decent day. So that was the RGEM model. I'm going to show you the Canadian model here for this, because the Canadian was fairly bullish. Hang on one second. Thank you, but no thank you. Dinner order. They asked me if I wanted to put in a dinner order tonight, and I'm not going to. I'm watching my girlish figure. Okay, so let's look at the Canadian. And the Canadian, by the way, I've been kind of looking at it. I admit it, I do look at it, but I was looking at it with this, and it's been pretty much dead on with this idea for the last 3 or 4 days. It hasn't really wavered with this idea of a coastal low, and it did it again today, and you can see it here. This is for tomorrow evening, and it brings the northern edge of snow up into the Hudson Valley and even into eastern Pennsylvania. Let's use the blue area. The darker blue is probably where the snow really accumulates, on the order of a couple of inches maybe, at least according to the Canadian's world. And actually the Canadian has a stripe of 2 to 3 inch snows from central New Jersey southward, and just touching and getting into Long Island, and even into southeastern Connecticut and through southern Rhode Island and southeastern Mass. So that's the Canadian's view. And again, the Canadian on this particular event has been kind of holding its own. Here's the GFS today. I got the 24-hour snowfall. I still think there's some missing data here with the GFS from NSEP because the maps, the snowfall maps still don't look right. But in terms of what it did at the surface, it's now, not that far off of what the Canadian did with that surface low or the RGEM model and the NAM. They are all pretty much lined up like this. And the European also did show some measurable precip 6 hours ago when that model run came out. So I'm thinking it'll probably adjust to the west and north as well when it comes out tomorrow early in the morning. So that's the short range issue. Now let's look at the long range issue, because we continue to see a very, very volatile upper air pattern that is impacting models in terms of their model runs. We go from cold runs like we did yesterday. Then we had 2 overnight runs that were very warm, or relatively warm. Now we've got them colder again today. This all is going to hinge in the long range on what's going to happen out in the west. Now, in the meantime, we are going to see some moderation early next week. I don't think there's any question of that. We do have a shot of cold air that arrives for Wednesday and Thursday, and that rotates up and out, but another vortex, a little one, forms in southwestern Hudson Bay, and you can see that this model run wants to bring a trough down into the southwest, but unlike prior runs, it is, unlike the runs from the overnight, which were warm, it's still maintaining some semblance of a cyclonic flow in Canada. So that keeps cold air relatively close by, especially at the lowest levels of the atmosphere. And it kind of separates that thing in the southwest. And I think that's important. If you're going to have that troughing in the southwest, let it be a separate entity and cut off. And then we maintain a separate northern jet that comes from the Arctic regions down through Canada and then swings across southern Canada, and cold air bleeds down into the United States in a pattern like this. And then what would happen is you would get pieces of this getting ejected out, and one such piece seems to want to come out around Christmas Eve, and then another one the day after Christmas. Longer term, it looks like it wants to stay cold going into the last days of December and into perhaps the new year with a setup like this. But I'm just going to tell you right now, we're going to keep seeing a lot of model volatility. I'm not sure exactly what's going on, and the reason, I tend to think that when you have the oscillation indexes that we point to from time to time, the North Atlantic Oscillation, the Pacific North America Index, the Eastern Pacific Oscillation, the last two, the PNA and the EPO, are going to be sitting at some extreme values, and I think it just sends the models nuts when it does that, and it doesn't know how to quite handle it. There's just everything seems to be stretched to a limit in the upper atmosphere. And I got to tell you, at some point with that kind of volatility and let's call it stretching, I would tend to think that there's going to be some consequence to that in terms of a storm. Now where, I don't know, or how, I don't know yet, but we'll see. Now here's the full U.S. view. There's our system for tomorrow. Also, there's a little bit of rain down in the Gulf states and getting some snow into the Pacific Northwest. And you folks in the Central Rockies that haven't seen much snow might get a shot with this if we get this southwest system to cut off the way it's doing. We'll get closer to that in a second. Here's Tuesday, weather front and some Gulf moisture, not a lot, just some showers ahead of that, and then it turns colder for Wednesday, Thursday. Now at this point, this is where we start to get that troughing down into the southwest, and we have low pressure that moves into Oklahoma, so it looks like maybe some snows finally for Colorado here later next week, if this is right. But again, remember, a lot of changing going on, and if it winds up that there is no trough in the southwest, don't be surprised. But at least this model, the last couple of model runs seem to want to do this. Now, looking at what the upper air was showing, I think the models for the last few days have been pointing to the possibility of a significant icing event for parts of Texas, eastern Oklahoma, and Arkansas late next weekend and early into Christmas week. I think the risk is there with the overrunning for that to happen. Now, whether it sets up there or further south or further north, I don't know yet. But it seems to me that with the upper air that's indicated, there is the potential for some overrunning situations, both across the Gulf states and then eventually into the Northeast, which is what the GFS did on this run, bringing actually some snow during Christmas Day that changes over to rain near the coast, if you want to believe it this far out. But the bottom line is, the more important part of all this is the fact that it looks like there will be some overrunning events to contend with, and then it turns very cold as we move into the long range. But again, model volatility is going to rule here, and we're going to see a lot of things change some more over the coming days. Europe, let's take a look at what's going on with our friends across the pond. And you know, we mentioned yesterday that it looks like the pattern was changing a little bit here as well, a little bit warmer perhaps for the British Isles, and I think that does look to be the case in the next couple of weeks. You know, some little pockets of cold air, but we don't see any widespread snow with the pattern that's developing across the U.S. There's no blocking at all, so there's no way. The cold air that winds up getting up into the British Isles is limited until we have some blocking, and some east-based blocking at that. Looks like a big storm on the models here, but this is still way out in the long range, talking about days 12 and 13, so we're going past Christmas now with something somewhere between Greenland and Scotland. There are 948 pressure, and then a stronger one further to the east a couple of days after that. But you know what? Who knows at this point how that all plays out. So you can see what we're dealing with here, a pretty volatile situation going forward. We are going to be probably on our toes with this, but you know what? It's pretty exciting. I have to find out, by the way, if I sent a message to the Weather Service about whether it's any kind of record to have 3 1-inch or more snowfalls in the month of December in the first 15 days. I know it's not a record for the whole month, but for the first 15 days, that's a lot. I mean, you go most Decembers without any snow in the first 15 days of the month, let alone 3. We've had 2 so far, and I'm talking specifically with regards to New York City. We'll see if I get an answer back. I'll let you know. Let me check real quick, because sometimes they answer me fast and sometimes they don't. And so far, they have not answered me back. So we'll definitely let you know what the answer to that question is. Okay, Adam Fitz, Daniello. By the way, Daniello and all of you, amazing, by the way, how we could go from thinking that there really isn't too much going on to have a lot going on in almost a blink of an eye. But that's the nature sometimes of these things. Jason Schaefer, the leftward model migration has continued. Yes, and you know what? Remember, we've been talking about the fact over the last 6 to 8 weeks, this has got to be the 4th or 5th time that this is happening here. And if we get a little bit more of a westward shift, instead of maybe a coating to 1 inch or 2, we might be talking about, several inches for some coastal areas, and maybe a coating of 1 inch shifted back to the northwest toward New York City and Philadelphia. Openly speculating here, I'm not leaning in that direction, but that westward shift is very important. Fallen Angel, would you believe some people were wondering why we didn't have a 2-hour delay or inclement bus stops? Yeah, these small storms sometimes can be so problematic, but if it wasn't problematic for you, good, because we got to, some areas you got to toughen up. This is for my area especially. This is New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Long Island, Hudson Valley. I don't need to point out the folks in eastern Pennsylvania, because you're rugged types, and so are the folks in northern New Jersey and in the Hudson Valley and even on Long Island. But we should be used to a 2-inch snowfall. This is not Atlanta. Okay. Mike Bologna wants 100 inches for the season. Well, you've got 94 to go for New York City anyway, and actually even for Long Island. MJM Tree Service for my area, Ocean County, getting this kind of action is just the best a winter lover can ask for. And you might have another shot there, MJM, with tomorrow. Could sleet, ice, maybe even rain for Boston near Christmas. Tom Adams, not impossible with the overrunning. You know, we're going to be close. However the longer range pattern plays out, we are going to be close to the boundary of cold air and warm air, and that's usually, you know, that's where the action usually lies, at least, especially, you know, in overrunning situations, that will be the case. So, you know, I think it's going to be a very interesting pattern going forward. It's got a little bit of work to do as we move the chess pieces around, but I think it's going to be very interesting. Daniello, you're in Eastern Bergen County. If you're talking about for tomorrow, you might be too far north, but let's see if it shifts any more to the northwest. And Martin M., winter will remember what happens in December. A good rhyme and possibly some truth in that. I think, you know, the pattern does look to continue the way it is in one form or another going into January. Whether it goes beyond that remains to be seen, but it will be very interesting nonetheless. The trough in the southwest bringing much needed rain to California. Yes, possible. It'd be more southern California rather than north, but assuming it happens, because I'm still not 100% completely sold that it is going to happen. Let's see. Tom Adams, you've got it, Tom. I'm going to just tell you, you got to stop jumping from run to run. You're going to drive yourself crazy. Try to focus more on the upper air and wait till you get into the shorter range before you make conclusions, because I still think I think the door is open to the possibility of some wintry precipitation around Christmas Day on either side. But if you wanted for a white Christmas, I suppose it would just be for right before Christmas, obviously, or on Christmas Day. I think it's possible, so don't rule it out. Okay, not at this point. There's too much volatility in what the models and how the models are behaving. Sean K., thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Thank you for hitting Super Chat. That get me a little coffee here after I'm done with the live stream. Thank you. Anthony Orr, is the MJO phases in the PNA causing an issue on models? Anthony's referring to the Madden-Julian oscillation, which basically monitors tropical activity in parts of the far West Pacific and Indian Ocean. And it's in a phase right now that would favor cold, wintry weather in the east. The PNA, the Pacific North America Index, has been kind of out of whack, strongly positive, about to go strongly negative for a couple of days, and the EPO, the Eastern Pacific Oscillation, is supposed to go very negative. Yeah, I think that all of these, and very negative, by the way, usually means cold for the East. I think having those indexes stretched to extremes is really causing the models big problems, and that very active MJO out to the far west. Yeah, the positive NAO, David, I'm not really too concerned about. As long as we've got the negative EPO and then a trending positive PNA, that I think is far more important than the NAO. The NAO will do its thing every once in a while, and be part of the equation, but it really isn't too relevant right now for us. Adam Fitzjoe, is it an unusual occurrence this early to see so much volatility? Yeah, not really. I think it's, it's certainly a sign of the atmosphere being in turmoil, and out of volatility sometimes comes big events. Nothing seems to be shown on the models, but I would just caution that sometimes, a lot of times when you're going to have something big or bigger, models don't pick up on it right away. On the other hand, every once in a while, you'll see the model pick up on a big storm early and kind of stick with it. So I don't think there's going to be anything big here from the standpoint of, a deep storm in terms of pressure or anything like that. I do think that, we could wind up with a couple of good overrunning events that have a decent amount of moisture to play with as we move closer and closer to Christmas and beyond. White Christmas for Halifax, Ben McGinnis. Let me see. Let's see what the the model has to, the GFS has to offer for you folks up in Canada. And you know what? I'll just pull the map up for you. We'll do it so that everybody can see. So let's bring this up top. Okay. Hang on one second. And okay, so let's go to Eastern Canada. Southeastern Canada. Oh, we must go to the beginning. Oh, it looks like, well, you know, this would kind of make sense, by the way. This is the low that's developing now off the East Coast. It does graze Nova Scotia with a little bit of snow here on Saturday, and also gives some snow to Newfoundland, perhaps a bit more than Nova Scotia gets, because the low does get kind of wrapped up there. And then after that, as we go through next week, with the warming in the east, I would tend to think that that would not be too favorable for you, and the model does indicate that. Then a chance for snow and ice later next weekend. As far as the snow totals are concerned, here's your total snowfall for the next 10 days. So you do actually produce some snow over the 10-day period of 12 centimeters or more, and also over Newfoundland. Not bad. You're getting something. I think you're going to see something over the next 10 days or so up your way with what the pattern is looking like. While I have this up, why don't we check the snow in the eastern part of the United States, and then we'll look at the west. So here's the east over the next 10 days, and the model's showing now this includes sleet. So you know what? Let me take this out and put the positive change so we can take that out, and it does show some accumulating snow in a good chunk of Texas here, and that would represent what we saw on the model with pointing toward around or just before Christmas Eve, perhaps, with something significant for that part of the world, for that part of the U.S. Not too much in the Mid-Atlantic or Southeast. Gets a little bit more with a little bit of lake effect action, and also up in the lakes. But remember, if we wind up with colder model runs going forward, if the southwest cutoff is a little less impressive, if the northern part of the jet stream is a little bit stronger, then you could wind up with more snow further south. And then in the west, over the next 10 days, gets pretty active. All of the Rockies seem to get into some snow here, and again, this is going to be a function of whether that upper low cuts off in the southwest. If that happens, then a lot of what you see is real. If that doesn't happen, or if it stays weaker and swings to the east a lot sooner, then you're going to get a lot less. So that feature in the upper pattern is going to be extremely important to everybody in the long term, both in the east and in the west. Okay, so let me come back to you guys on the comments. Let's see. J-Bug's Empire, you have a dusting. Most of the lake effect snows that started in Milwaukee and went down the western side of the lake. You need that northern jet to get stronger for you to get some more lake effect action up your way. Snow on the ground for Ryan Kong, the Asian weather boy up in his area of Minnesota. Good for you. I think you'll see some more over the coming 10 days. Andrew Wells, you found the answer to the question. So you were the difference between lake effect and lake enhanced. Okay, lake effect snow is snow produced by the lake, no low pressure. Lake enhanced is snow made more intense by the lake effect process within the system snow. Okay, there's the distinction there. Oh, good. I learned something new. I didn't know whether there was a difference or if they were both the same thing. Apparently, there is a slight difference to all of that, to both of those factors. Thank you for checking that. I really appreciate it. Saved me the trouble of doing it. And I forget sometimes, folks. So you guys sometimes ask me to look for stuff, and I try to remember. I don't always remember. If that's the case, just remind me, okay, on the chat board, and I'll be glad to. I'll make sure I'll make a note of checking. Wayne S., What am I expecting Friday here on Long Island? Well, you know what? I think after what I saw this afternoon, I got to allow for the possibility that we could have maybe another repeat performance of what we had last night, which would be an inch or two, or perhaps a little bit more than that. The risk is definitely there. So we're going to take a look again tonight. I'm going to do, again, let me remind you of the schedule tonight. So figure at about 9:15 on Facebook, Joe Rayo and I will live stream, and we'll look at the new NAM to see if this westward trend continues as far as this weather system for Friday for areas from Delaware on up to southern New England, including Philadelphia and New York City. And tonight, after that, tonight, between 11:30 and midnight, look for a YouTube live stream. I'll have the GFS and hopefully most of the Canadian, and we certainly will have the RGEM, so we have a little more information regarding what might happen tomorrow. And maybe the models will come back and shift to the east and take this all out. Don't know for sure. We'll find out later on. In the meantime, folks, have a great evening. I got a couple of website posts up at meteorologistjoecioffi.com. If you want to look some more at what's going on for tomorrow and in the longer range, you can check it over there. And so we'll see you tonight on Facebook, 9:15 Eastern, and back on YouTube, hopefully live sometime between 11:30 and midnight.